Hello, my name is Julie, and it's time for me to get rid of a ton of books. I think I have 4 feet, I'm gonna measure them later. I have 4 feet of books to get rid of. Lately, I have been very good about not having sentimentality towards books that I thought were just okay. I've kind of hit a wall on how much room I currently have to store books. And unless I get new bookshelves, which I kind of am planning on doing this year now, they need to go. But I actually had a lot of books that I read last year that I didn't like very much. And in shelving the books that I did like last year, I had a lot of books that I read in previous years that I had kept for one reason or another that I'm deciding to get rid of now. So this will hopefully be a very nice refresh for me. And almost every single one of the books that I'm going to show you today is going to be available on my Pango shop. I am not sponsored by them, but this is a service that I use where you can become your own used bookstore. You put your books up for a listing and other readers can buy it. I really like their service. I've sold a lot of books through them. Most of these books are going to be put on my Pango, but there are a handful that cannot because they are advanced readers copies that were sent to me by the publisher. Those are books that cannot be resold. And so those are going to go to little free libraries in my area, or if there's any friends that I have who are interested in them, I'm going to give it to them. Everything else is Pango material. I wanted to let you know, if you're here for my Unhaul, something you might be interested in, I am doing a series right now on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts that is Unfuck Our Shelves. The idea is I am giving us different challenges throughout the year to help make our bookshelves feel like our own reading taste. If you're someone like me who sometimes looks at their shelf and just goes, those ones, really? This is for us. I am actively participating in this challenge that I am setting myself. I'm kind of inspiring it by what I am unhauling, and these books are definitely books you are going to see in future episodes of Unfuck Our Shelves. A lot of the books that I'm going to be talking about are books that I rated like 2 or 3 stars in the last year. I'm going to be crapping on a lot of these books, so I don't want to like discourage you from reading them if they do seem like your vibe. They just did not personally work for me, and that's why I'm wanting to give them new life on other shelves and find the readers that they are actually for. Some of them are actually books that I enjoyed. I just want to have a new home, and I know I'm not going to reread them. So I've got a mix of things, so let's just get started. I have 2 piles of books here, and I'm going to start out with the pile of books that I read in 2025. First off is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. This is a retelling of Bertha from Jane Eyre. This imagines her as Antoinette. She is a white Creole girl whose family's wealth has been depleted because the slaves have been freed. Her mother is considered mad, and she gets married off to this Englishman. I found this book to be bland. I found this book to be boring. I thought that there was very little going on with this book. I felt no emotional depth from it. I just did not get anything out of this book. And you absolutely could have fooled me until the last chapter or so that this was supposed to be connected to Jane Eyre. Well, I had heard things about it that was like anti-colonialist and feminist and everything. And then I read the book and I didn't feel those themes strongly other than like a woman not being in control of her own life. I'm like, I know. But this just didn't work for me at all. And I was massively judged online for saying this is a book that I didn't like, even though it has a 3.5 on Goodreads. Thank you. Second up, we have The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This is a general fiction suspense novel, I'd call it, where our main character is a woman who has recently married a man who has like a teenage daughter. He works for some tech company that is about to go public. They come under fire. There's supposed to be some investigations into fraud. As soon as that news story breaks, he disappears, leaving behind a note to her to take care of his teenage daughter. She's kind of trying to find out what happened to him. I just don't think that this book had a compelling mystery. I don't think there was very much to it. I was really surprised that this book was turned into a TV show, considering how little happened in this book. I didn't think that the author tried to make us very connected to the characters, and I thought it was really obvious what the situation that the daughter and her family were in. There's no like building of suspense. There's no like clues for you to pick up. It just is revealed to you in a monologue by a character you've never met before. I have read 2 of Laura Dave's books now, and I have given both of them 2 stars, so I know for a fact I'm not going to read Laura Dave again. Then we have Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I have previously read In the Dream House by this author and absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite nonfictions. This has actually been on my TBR for longer than In the Dream House was, and I had just heard really nice things about this short story collection collection. This is for somebody, and I had been told that it would probably be for me, and like not one of the stories really knocked it out of the park for me. I thought all of these stories were pretty good, but none of these are really going to stay with me. The collection is general fiction / sometimes horror, sometimes a little bit of sci-fi that is mostly dealing with like the viscerality of women's bodies. For me to keep a short story collection, I feel like there has to be at least like one 5-star short story for me. And like, I think the max that this ever got to was a 4. This wasn't for me, but I know for a fact that other people really like it. If you're a short story person, I would push it in your direction. Then we have Devil House by John Darnielle. I read this in a vlog where I was reading the lowest rated books on my Goodreads TBR. And this was the only one that I owned, I believe, that made that list. But I actually did listen to the audiobook of this because this was in a different house. It is narrated by the author. It advertises itself to look like a horror book, but this is really a general fiction that involves true crime. This is loosely about our main character, who is a true crime author. His debut book was a total hit. The crime he was covering was a thing that happened in his hometown. He had a lot of knowledge of the case and everything, and it was a smash hit, but nothing's been a hit since. And his publisher or somebody is like, hey, there's this house that had murders in it in the 80s. You should move in there and investigate. One section is him like moving into the house. One section is like the book that he wrote that made him popular. One section is the book that he's writing now. I don't think that this book was very focused. I think that it was trying to do different things that did not coalesce into a whole. There was one section that seemed very heartfelt and talking about true crime, and then directly after it, there was a section that completely undercut any sincerity in it. I struggled to know what this book was really going for. I don't know that I would pick up another one from him. Oh my god, Carmen Maria Machado is on the back. It's for a different book. Joseph Fink. I was interested in Wolf and White Van once upon a time, but I don't know if I am. Anyway, next up we have Falling by TJ Newman. This is a thriller that takes place on a plane. There is a pilot who is flying on commercial flight from the west to the east coast. He is blackmailed by someone who says that they have his family hostage, and if he does not crash the plane, his whole family is going to die, and it's figuring out what to do. A lot of it takes place on the plane as the crew are trying to figure out how to not alert the passengers and how to deal with this. I thought that the plot that takes place on the plane was fairly engaging, and the stuff that was on the ground a little bit less so. I did like the idea of like, how are we doing a creative plane jacking in post 9/11? However, I do think that this book doesn't diverge enough from the actual events of 9/11, in my opinion. I think that's pretty tasteless in terms of like being creative. Like, okay, you just took something that already happened. It's not supposed to be historical fiction, but also in the sense of like, hey, maybe do something different from like a huge tragedy that had huge ramifications for a country and for brown people in this country. That's my opinion. I thought that the thrilling element of this book was all right. It didn't stand out to me. Then we have an arc, so this is not going to be one that is going to go on my pango. That is The Last Session by Julia Bartz. This is her sophomore novel. I read her debut, The Writing Retreat, a couple years ago, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. It's one of my favorite thrillers. I love it so, so much. This book, our main character works in like a psych ward or something like that, and there is a woman who comes in who looks very much like her, and it turns out that that woman was an actor that our main character is obsessed with, and she leaves like a strange message behind when she like kind of disappeared from the psych ward when somebody checks her out when she shouldn't have. And our main character finds out that this woman was at this like weird health retreat in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico at like this commune, and she decides to investigate what's going on and try to find that woman and get her out of there. This book is really weird. This has under a 3 on Goodreads. I believe it has in the 2.9 range, and I totally see why, because what the fuck was up with this book? I do not know what this author was going for. It feels like it's going in one direction for a while, and then it kind of leaves thriller territory in a way that I don't think was satisfying. Just kind of leaves the territory of what I think was established as possible. I don't understand what this book was trying to go for. I don't think that this is marketed the right way. I don't think that the ending really matches the rest of the book. I think that this was compulsively readable. I think that Julia Bartz is someone that I would continue to pick up from in the future. I just don't think she constructed something here that worked nearly as well. Even though The Writing Retreat is a very divisive book, there are still people who love that one. Then we have Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. I don't know why I'm holding it like this. This is a sci-fi horror by the author of Dead Silence. I think that was one of my favorite books of 2024. A woman is investigating this disease that people have that when they experience stress in like a spaceship sort of situation, they are prone to violence, and she is trying to stop that. She gets sent out to this crew where one of their members just died, and so she is trying to make sure that that disease doesn't break out. And they are investigating a planet where a former humanoid type species on another planet existed. I don't think this author knew what she was doing either. I don't think that the main character was built out very well. And then she is supposed to be the psychologist person, but she's very immature with her own emotions. I don't think that the reveals of what was going on with her past ended up mattering all that much. I was really interested in what was going on with this alien species, and then we don't get any answers with that. And also, big problem, the synopsis of this book that is written on the book spoils something that happens at like the 60 to 75% mark. So you keep waiting for this inciting incident to happen and happen and happen, and it doesn't happen until most of the way through the book. I just don't think it worked. Then we have The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. Sad to be unhauling a book by Julie, and sad to be unhauling this gorgeous, gorgeous cover. I love this cover so much, and I would be lying if I said this wasn't a little bit of a cover buy. Our main character is Tao. She will predict your future, but only very small things, and it is because she knows that if she tells bigger fortunes, then that will have terrible ramifications for other people, and she's really afraid of that. And she's also from another country. She's from an Asian-inspired country, and she's living in a European-inspired country, and she is very much an outsider and just kind of travels around trying to scrape by. She meets this pair of guys that are these tough guys on the road who end up helping her out of a bind, and one of them, she ends up predicting that he will give his daughter a cat, and he's like, holy shit, my daughter's missing. We need to stay with you because you might be able to help us. They start this little band together of trying to find this little girl. I think the synopsis is so good, and then the book just didn't execute on it. The plot of this book had very little to do with the finding of the little girl. The people aren't finding clues along the way. They aren't like following a trail or anything. They're just going from town to town, and they're like, has anyone heard from the little girl? No, okay, we'll stay here for a day and leave. And it just kind of felt like a repetitive cycle. There was also just like a section in this book that felt like an adventure fantasy out of nowhere that had no repercussions on the rest of the book. And I was just really confused. This wasn't for me. I can see it being for someone else, but I just don't think that this is as well constructed as other cozy fantasies I've read. Then we have another arc I received from the publisher. This was from Tor. This is The Teeth of Dawn by Marina Lostetter. This is the third book in the 5 Penalties series. The first book is The Helm of Midnight, which is a fantasy book that I absolutely loved, about you can imbue someone's best quality after they have died into a mask. There is a mask that is super protected because it is of a serial killer. And that mask is stolen, the killings start up again, and we follow 3 perspectives. Someone who came into contact with the mask in the past, someone who's hunting down the mask, and the serial killer in the past themselves. The sequels deal with like very vague world building that the first book does, and the second and third book feel very disconnected from the first book because the first book basically doesn't deal with that. I think the best thing to do would have been having the first book be a standalone and cut off that extra world building stuff, and then have a separate series be focused on the things that are actually about the 5 penalties. I think there were some really interesting things that this book did, explaining how the world got to the position that it's in, but any perspective that was taking place during the current timeline dealing with our characters that we already know and love, those characters were absolutely shafted. So all of the good things about this book were new, and the things that were good about the previous books were not really carried into this one, in my opinion. I think that this was so involved in trying to make an interesting world that I don't think it made that interesting of a finale. Then we have The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older, and I'll have to take the sticker off from the bookstore. This is the first in a sci-fi, western, sapphic mystery novella series that is about this like Holmesian pair who live on Jupiter trying to solve a murder mystery. I keep picking up all these sci-fi fantasy murder mysteries, and so few of them actually work for me, and this is just one of them that doesn't. It is so short that I don't think it really nails its world building for you to understand what the parameters are for this world in order for you to solve the mystery. I think if I am not involved in the murder mystery at all, if I can't figure out what's even possible, I'm not interested and I don't want to read it. I thought the writing style in this was like so pretentious. Oh my God. The comparison that I made recently is the last book I read in 2025 was Les Mis. And every once in a while, Victor Hugo will use the word august. I believe that Malka Older in this less than 200 page book used the word august the same number of times as Victor Hugo did in 1400 pages of Les Mis. I did not get along with this book at all, and I can tell it's for a pretty particular reader, and that reader will absolutely love it, and I'm just not that person. Also, I didn't think that the relationship was sold well at all. Then I have Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. You all voted for me to read this in my Taskmaster video, in which I read the book that would make me look the coolest. Unfortunately, is it still cool if I didn't like this book? I've heard people say they really enjoyed this. I did not find anything to enjoy. This is a dystopian novel that is about our main character, Snowman, who seems to be the last human to survive an apocalypse that was caused by people he knows. And we are flipping back and forth between when he is younger and leading up to this apocalypse and when he is actually experiencing the apocalypse. I found the main character to be absolutely vile, and also there's a lot of stuff in this book that is gross that I wish I had not read, even though I think that this book is having really interesting conversations about like AI and how capitalism is ruining scientific pursuits because it is making people chase a profit instead of benefiting society. And I think the themes of this book are fantastic. I just think that this has one of the nastiest main characters I've ever read, who I hated every second of being in his mind. And I think that Margaret Atwood did a fantastic job freaking method acting. I can appreciate the commentary that this book was having without enjoying it. And I absolutely will not be continuing on in the series, no matter how many times people tell me that, oh, the sequels are better. It can't possibly be good if this was the first book, in my opinion. I love Margaret Atwood. I'll keep reading her stuff, but like, Then we have Rose House by Arkady Martine. This is a novella that was originally indie published and then traditionally published last year. This is a sci-fi murder mystery. Again, a thing that doesn't work for me. That is about an AI house that was created by this architect guy who, when he died, he made it so only one person could enter the house, his protege, one time a year. Right before that one time a year is going to happen, there's a dead body in the house, and the house does not alert the police for a while that it has happened. The person who is allowed into the house, who was out of the country at the time, has to go back and try to figure out what's happening. This felt like a fever dream, but like not in a good way. Like it was really hard to follow what was actually happening in the book. I actually had my friend read this before I did because she was interested in it. And she also couldn't get through it, and we had very similar comments of just being like, it's very hard to follow the string of the narrative. I really enjoyed Arkady Martine in the past. I love A Memory Called Empire. I could not have identified at all that this is the same author. I thought the writing style was just something I could not parse at all, and it did not focus on the things that I thought it was going to focus on. And then I found the murder mystery itself to be fairly uninteresting when it actually got to the reveal. And we have Zone 1 by Colson Whitehead. This is one of his older books, and it's his least popular by a long shot. This is a zombie novel that takes place in New York City, which is Zone 1 of zombies. And there is a collective of people who are trying to clear out all the zombies in order for people to repopulate the US. Him and a bunch of other people are having to go through New York City, killing off the zombies and trying to stay alive. A lot of this takes place in the past of our main characters, like finding out their backstories and everything. There's like one scene in particular that is just so harrowing that like will stay with me, but the rest of this book was fairly plotless in my opinion, and I don't think it actually added anything to the zombie post-apocalyptic genre. I have read several books that are trying to do this same thing, and I think this is just not very successful at trying to get these metaphors across and everything. This has a pretentious writing style as well, and there was no normal word that was chosen when a larger word would do. I'm like, just say house. I don't think that this really went anywhere. It had a very predictable ending. If this synopsis sounds interesting to you, I think you should read Severance by Ling Ma instead. Then we have Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. It is fiction about the women who were impacted by Ted Bundy. We have two main characters, one of the girls from the sorority house at FSU, and one of the girls is one of his victims that was killed in Washington. And we are flipping back and forth between seen one perspective in the past before she is killed and one perspective as like after the killings at the sorority house were done. I think that there were some compelling things about this book, but it never tipped over into something that I was adoring. I'm under the impression that the author was actually talking to the people involved and like this was done with consent by them. So I think that's good. And I think that this does portray these women as people who had bright futures ahead of them, but were working through the difficulties that they already had. I think it portrayed them in a very fleshed out way. I just never felt overly attached to this book. I don't know if that's like a writing style thing, that it just wasn't 100% my thing, but this just wasn't my perfect book. And I know that there are other people out there that it will be. And so I'm happy to give this to someone who will love it more than me. Speaking of, we have the book that I rated the highest of all of the books that I am no longer going to be owning. I actually would recommend this book highly. I just know for a fact I'm never going to reread it. And I would rather, because it is YA, I would rather a young person have it. But this is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. This is about a pair of teenagers who are growing up during the Syrian civil war, which I did not know did not end until well after this book was published. Like, I read this book within like a couple months of it finally being declared over. This war was going on for a very long time, and it's something that I had no idea about. And our main character, Layla, is someone who was wanting to be a doctor and who had dreams of going to college and everything and becoming a doctor. And her entire life has been stunted by the fact that she is now in a war-torn zone. She's having to step up from being a student to being a doctor and being someone who's having to perform surgeries on all of these children and all these victims, like, constantly. And she also meets this boy who has been filming all of these things that are happening and trying to get the word out there and being a journalist and everything. And it turns out they meet each other and they find out that before the war, they were actually arranged by their parents that they were going to be together. And they are falling in love on this backdrop of this war-torn place. And honestly, as a YA book, this is way more violent than I was anticipating. And I think that this did a very good job portraying the realism of war. And I had to put this book down several times because it was just really intense. Even when I was a teenager, I wasn't really a fan of YA romance. And so, like, I didn't perfectly love everything that was about that part of the book. And I honestly was pretty disappointed by the end of this book. There was something that was done at the end of it that wasn't to my taste, but I understand other people really liking it. I've just read it a million times and I thought that this book was going to be doing something different. I think that this is a really important book for young readers to have, and I think having this book in my house where a young reader can't have it feels irresponsible to me. I am purposely going to be giving that book to my used bookstore. Then we have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is a time travel romance, which is why I picked it up. I'll tell you, the back half of this book was like 5 stars to me. The front half of this book was not close. Our main character, her aunt has passed away, who she loved very much, and she has this apartment in New York City, and she moves in there, and it turns out there's a 7-year slip where she will sometimes like fade into the past, or the person from the past will be there. And there, 7 years ago, there was a guy who was like, while her aunt was on vacation, staying in the apartment for the summer, and she falls in love with this guy from 7 years ago. She ends up in real life running into him now 7 years later. And so it is a little bit bouncing back and forth between those two. I thought it was going to do that more. I think that if the front half of this book was executed better, that this could have been a 5-star book for me. I think the themes of this book, falling in love with someone and then years go by and they're suddenly someone you don't recognize, is so potent and such an important thing to talk about in a romance book. And I think that that was done really well. But I think the front part of the book, where it's trying to be a normal romance book, really did not work for me. I think there was very little establishment of these two characters. They just immediately are in love with each other. I feel like if this was made into a movie, this could be done and done perfectly, and it would be something I would absolutely love. Anyway, then we have another romance, The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. I have read all of Casey McQuiston's work, and I would say that this is my least favorite. That's pretty much the popular opinion. I don't think this book is bad. It just did not stand out for me in a year where a lot of romance just did not stand out for me. This is about our two main characters. I do not remember their names. Theo and Kit. And they grew up together. They were each other's first everything. They were in a relationship for a very, very long time into like their college years and everything. Years ago, they They were going to go on this food and wine tour of Europe. They ended up breaking up on the plane there, and they haven't talked in 5 years. And they have, like, their voucher to go on this trip is, like, expiring. And so they both go on the very last opportunity. They have a hookup competition on this trip that they're trying to hook up with as many people as possible to kind of, like, get back at the other person. But of course, they just end up wanting to be together. But they do hook up with other people. I think some people aren't liking that, and that was not a problem I had with this book. I just didn't think that the backstory of this was done that well. I don't know that they actually, like, resolved all of their problems. I think the food and wine tour of the book is the selling point to me. The descriptions of going on this trip and having all this food, it was just so much fun to read, and it made me want to go back to Europe. I also thought there was a very weird thing in this book. The first half of the book is from one character's point of view, and then the second half of the book is from the other character's point of view, and I think that was a really weird choice that honestly made this book worse. I think it kind of glossed over some things. I don't know. Then we have Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake, which is another romance. Sorry. This is a Christmas romance. This is a very similar situation to the last book where they grew up together. They were each other's first everything. These two got engaged and one of them left the other at the altar and they haven't talked in 5 years. Almost identical setups. The two of them are very sad around Christmas time, and they each have a friend invite them. They're in totally different cities. They each have a friend invite them to their house for Christmas, and it turns out their two friends are siblings, and they had no idea. And so these two end up in this small town. They are forced to go on this, like, big group date thing that is hosted by the town, and I think that that element could have been completely removed from this book, and the book would be the same. I think that this is not well constructed, and if I thought that these two didn't address everything, these characters never even get close to fixing the problem. And it just kind of does, love conquers all. Problems don't exist anymore. It's like that song from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. We'll never have problems again. And I don't think that these two characters were very well established, and when they are, they're a bit annoying at least. Some people found these characters to be unbearable. I was kind of, like, not caring enough. I found this easy to get through, and that was kind of, like, the only good thing I could say about this. This is a really, really unpopular romance. It is one of the lowest rated books I own. My God, I've been talking forever. I've been talking for so long. I just want to go home. I am home, but I want to stop. Then we have Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. This is a nonfiction that I thought was going to be about taxonomy, and it turns out it's about a taxonomist, David Starr Jordan, who is most known for being the first president of Stanford, and it turns out he was also a terrible person on every front and possibly even orchestrated a murder. Maybe you think is going to be interesting. Trust me, it's not. It starts out with the author heard this anecdote about David Starr Jordan about how when there was an earthquake and all of his specimens fell to the ground, he sewed tags onto the fish himself, and it was like this moment of perseverance. And she really admired that, and so she started looking into him, and she does a biography of him, and as she finds out all these bad things about his life, she's like, oh, he wasn't actually a guy who really had a lot of perseverance. He was actually a delusional control freak who was also a eugenicist. I think that this book tried to have, like, a self-helpy angle at the end, and I just don't think that worked at all. I think that this book tried to be something that it absolutely was not, and I would have been so much more interested in reading a science-y book than this. I don't read a lot of biographies, and if I had known that this was a biography and not about taxonomy, because it's not about why fish don't exist, I think that this was trying to be inspiring, and not only is that not something I would like to read in the first place, I don't think it succeeded at being that. This is in really poor condition. I got this from a Little Free Library, so I will be returning it to the Little Free Library. Then we have Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. I think I partially got this from Book of the Month because I wanted to get something else from Book of the Month that month. This was something that I was interested in because of the movie coming out and wanting to know more about that story. This is about the Osage people in Oklahoma in the beginning of the 1900s. They were the richest people per capita in America for a short amount of time. The US government did not like that and did everything in their power to take their money away from them. There were a series of murders that happened because white people were trying to get the money, and because it wasn't technically in, like, Oklahoma state jurisdiction because they were on a reservation, the FBI essentially was created. We find out what the crimes were, and then we find out what the investigation was, and then we follow up in the future trying to see if there's any loose ends that the FBI didn't find. I think I would like the movie way more of this book because I don't think that this was told in a very compelling way. I think that this, like, kind of laid out the facts in a way that I was hoping to build some sort of tension or anything. I just don't think this did a good job being a narrative nonfiction. particularly got that for my dad, and he was not blown away by it either, and he reads a lot of nonfiction. So now we have some books that are older. So I did not read them this year. First off, we have The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, the physicist. This is a nonfiction about string theory. I bought this in 2018, and I was under the impression that it was a fairly new book. It turns out that this book is older than I am. So that means its theory is going to be pretty outdated. I have owned this for so long and have not read it because I never was in the mood to read a string theory book. Apparently, Brian Greene has a much more recent book that is also easier for the layman to understand, so there's no reason for me to have this. And I also definitely will not be buying that book. If I really want to read a book about string theory, I'll get it from the library. Then we have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is the collector's edition that came out when the Simon Snow books were coming out. This is about a girl named Kath who is going into college. She is a fanfiction writer of a property that is very clearly a ripoff of a certain wizarding property that we don't talk about anymore because fuck TERFs. And this was one of the first books that I ever read because of BookTube. I think I read this in probably like 2012, 2013 or something. And I really loved this book, but I own 2 copies of this. And there's no reason for me to have 2 copies of a book that, like, I don't think this matches my reading taste anymore. I don't think if I had read this today, I would be interested in it at all. So I am getting rid of this duplicate copy. And we have Foe by Ian Reid. There's this couple who lives on a farm, and one day a stranger from the city arrives with alarming news. Junior has been randomly selected to travel far away from the farm. Very far away. The most unusual part, arrangements have already been made so that when he leaves, Henrietta won't have a chance to miss him because she won't be alone, not even for a minute. I have read all of Ian Reid's books. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is one of my favorite books of all time. I love that book to death. Movie doesn't make a lot of sense, but they tried their best because it's unfilmable in my opinion. I have read We Spread and I liked it. I read this one and I just didn't get a lot out of it. I think it was kind of obvious what the twist was from pretty early on, and I just didn't really, like, I didn't care about this book enough that I didn't end up watching the movie with Saoirse Ronan, who I love Saoirse Ronan. Was it also Paul Mescal? Am I making that up? Was it Paul Mescal? As much as this does have, I think, Ian Reid's writing style in it, it was the least compelling version of it that I've read, and I don't think that the ending made up for the fact that I was the least interested I've been in any of his books. And also, this cover is ugly. Then we also have Landline by Rainbow Rowell. I really loved Rainbow Rowell when I was a teenager. I know that I did not really love her adult books. I hated Attachments, and I did not really love Landline. This is about a married couple who are going through problems. They're thinking about having a divorce. They have like a landline in their house, and it rings even though I don't think it's connected to the wall at all. And she picks it up, and it's her husband from when they're at the beginning of their relationship. And she's like rekindling her relationship by remembering what it was like in the beginning. And kind of like the 7-year slip, like I understand, like I think the metaphor is good here. I just didn't feel very emotionally attached to it. And I also read this book, I probably read this book 10 years ago. When did this book come out? I probably read it when it came out too. 2014. I absolutely 100% read this 10 years ago, and I don't need it anymore. And I would also like to say, I don't actually have the book on me right now because I completely forgot to grab it, but I am also going to be unhauling Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. This is a book that takes place in the 80s. It's a teen romance in between a white girl and an Asian boy. I'm under the impression that she's poor and also plus size, so people don't like her, and people don't like him because he's Asian. I really liked the book when I read it as a child, and like since then, the book is about racism, but it is perpetuating a lot of stereotypes about Asian people. And I, as a 12 to 13-year-old, didn't pick up on it. I have seen text from the book since, and I do agree that it plays into a lot of harmful stereotypes. And so I do want to get rid of the book. I don't know where I'm going to do with it, considering that that's my opinion of the book. But yeah, I don't need it anymore. I just don't have it on me right now. Then I have The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. I actually watched the play of this book before I read the book, and I enjoyed the play so much more. This is about a child. He's autistic, and he really has trouble synthesizing the world around him. I think people really keep a lot from him. The incident that kicks off this book is that his neighbor's dog dies, and he's trying to figure out what happened with that. I watched the play and absolutely loved it, cried my eyes out. And then I read the book, and I found the writing style to be super cold. And even though it's literally the exact same story and some of the things are said in the exact same way, like I just did not connect to this book at all when I had so deeply connected to the play version of it. So I don't think I need to have a book that I didn't feel anything towards. And I have Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. This is a classic general fiction. Woman goes time traveling. I don't know that this is 100% inspired by Slaughterhouse-5, but it's the same idea. Basically, once the main character hits her like 21st birthday, which is on New Year's, she lives her life out of order. Every single year is in a different order. I think that this does exactly what it says on the tin. It says exactly what you think it's going to say about life and living and everything. I think there was a bit of a compelling plot of like her actually trying to navigate, like figuring out what her life has been, because she does not retain her memories. She only remembers the life that she has actually experienced. She does not remember like the previous year if she hasn't lived it yet. It just hasn't stood out to me, and I was surprised I still owned this when I was looking at my shelf. So I think there's another person that would, enjoy it more than me. Sorry, Dad. Then we have Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, Book 5, The Dark Talent by Brandon Sanderson. My dad picked this up for me at a bookstore. He was like, oh, I saw a Brandon Sanderson book. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, sure. I think he said that it was the Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians. He didn't tell me it was book 5. I'm not going to read this series. I'm going to be so real with you. I'm not going to read this middle grade series. Maybe read the first book, but I definitely would not be interested in reading so many of the books. So I'm going to be making sure a kid who really wants to read the series is going to have this book. Speaking of middle grade, this might be YA. I don't know. This is, sadly, Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard by Rick Riordan. I love Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson was my entire life for many, many years. By the time that this book had come out, I was a little bit old for this. This is the first book in his Norse-inspired series. It's a character who ends up dying and goes to Asgard, and he finds out that he is a son of one of the Norse gods and is having to fight monsters a la Percy Jackson. I was not in love with this book when I read it the first time. I never continued on in the series, and I just know that there is, again, young reader who would love this so much more than me, and I really don't need to own this book that I did not have an attachment to even when I was younger. Then we have The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I also listed The Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski on my Pango, and it has already sold. I sold the illustrated edition, so I'm getting rid of both of these. These are the 2 short story collections that are in the Witcher series. You read them before you read the novels. I enjoyed this book more than I enjoyed the second one. This one was actually written second, though. People have told me a lot that I really won't get along with the series, and I didn't. It's written pretty distantly. I really don't like how it talks about women. It's got a weird narrative style that doesn't have a big driving force behind it, and I did DNF the series after reading the third book, which is the first novel. Then I have a set of 3 arcs that I had. This is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. This is the first book in the Saga of the Unfated, which is a Norse-inspired fantasy romance duology by the author of The Bridge Kingdom, which I loved. Didn't love this one. Our main character, Freya, has not told anyone that she is like a child of some gods and she has extra powers, but then a king finds out about it, makes him marry her even though he's like old enough to be her dad. They don't actually consummate the marriage or whatever because he loves his wife, and then she falls in love with his son. I don't know. I was not sold by this book at all. Did not get on board with the romance at all, even though I very easily got on board with the romances in her other series. I don't think that the plot of this series saved the fact that I was not interested in the romance at all. I actually thought that the second book was a pretty big downgrade from this book to begin with. So then we have 2 novellas that I got from Tor.com. This is The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark. This is about a world in which people can die and be like resurrected by a god and they won't remember their past life. Our main character is dedicated to this god who is like an assassin. She is an assassin for this assassin god, and somebody from her past that she should not be able to remember comes to her and they have to figure something out. I think that this should have been a full-length novel. I think it kind of squandered its promise because I think this had an interesting world. I think this had an interesting setup and just like stuff I haven't seen before done in fiction. And I just don't understand why this decided to be only this long, because it really felt like if you watched a movie, but only 50% of it. So there was no mystery left because there were no red herrings. If you're a sci-fi fantasy novella person, please read this book. I am not one of you. I am not a novella person in the case of Mammoths at the Gates either. This is the second book I read in this series. I've now read 3 of them. This is about a cleric named Chi who goes around the countryside getting different folk tales from people to collect. Cleric Chi is actually not collecting a story. Cleric Chi is coming back to the place that they are from as one of the other clerics has passed away. I didn't feel as connected to this as I did the first book in the series, and none of the books that I read in the series have compelled me as much as the first book did. I think I've read 4 Niveau books, and only one of them I rated like a 4-star. So I just don't think that this author is for me. Then we have a book that was a total 5-star prediction for me and just didn't end up being a favorite, and that's Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I'm so loath to give this book up because I think that this cover is gorgeous. This is a speculative fiction about a woman who, her wife was on this crazy submarine mission. Not all the people returned from the mission, and she came back strange I think that this book will either really work for people or you're just going to feel mad about it. I'm one of the people who went mad about it. I thought that this didn't go into the speculative element enough, and it just ended up feeling very Route 1, in my opinion. So I will be getting rid of this. And the last two big chunky fantasies that everyone's a fan of but me. I have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I have read the City of Brass series and I really loved it. I gave all of them like 4.5-ish. This was just like a 3.5 for me. I just don't think it stood out. This is a world that has Jin. Our main character used to be like a pirate or a person on a ship, and now she has retired. She's called back for like one last mission. I really hated the romance in this book, actually. And I just didn't find myself very on board with the plot. I felt like I was always trying to like catch up with something, and it just never really clicked with me. I don't know if I felt lost or I was just bored. It just wasn't necessarily for me. I know a lot of people love this series, and I think we finally got news of book 2 coming out in 2026, so I would love for somebody else to have this so they can read the next book. And they can actually get the hardcover to match the second book, so that's good. And the next one, I hate giving this book up. I hate it, but I have to. That is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. That was Shannon Chakraborty. This is Samantha Shannon. I loved Priory of the Orange Tree, and I do not own it. And I bought A Day of Fallen Night. This felt like a rehash of book 1, but less interesting. In book 1, there were so many perspectives that I was so pulled in by. And in this book, each one of the characters individually, there was something that I wasn't in love with about their perspective. And I thought that this book had like a little bit less of a focus. And also, part of the whole point of the Priory of the Orange Tree was that it was supposed to be a standalone. And then she's like, I need more money. Like, that's how it came across to me, the fact that we're getting more books in this series. Here's the thing. I'm not super sure if I'm interested in the novella that came out, but I think if there was another big chunky book like this, I might be interested in, but like this just didn't compel me. And I know that nobody agrees with me, and that's fine. Anyway, those are most of the books that I'm going to be getting rid of. I'm sure there's a handful else that I've forgotten and I don't have in these stacks, and that's okay. If there's any of these books that you already love, or like my review of them did not deter you, please check out my Pango, pick up the books. I would love to have them in your home instead of mine. And if not, I'm going to be giving them to little free libraries in my area and used bookstores. And that means I'm going to have all the more room on my shelves for books that I'm actually going to like. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere, you can find me at the links in the description, including my Pango. If you'd like to keep watching my videos, you can hit subscribe. I'd love to have you. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.